We have not been given any reprieve. We have been told we should get this bill out today. So we're going to start the one section of the bill as it's come to us. That we haven't gone over is the excess spending threshold. The governor last night mentioned. Patrick, you can go steal some chairs from the front.
Sit on the bench.
Okay, yeah, you can sit in the windowsill. Anyway, the excess spending threshold. And I think where somebody should tell the tax commissioner, bring some chair. But I think that I've been told the House did it this way because essentially they're similar and there are things that we can do to excess spending that would put more cost containment pressure on. You can grab a chair or any other committee room and bring it in if you'd like, because there may be room in the windowsill.
Have to join my front path.
We'll just pick all this stuff over there. Good, I need that. I have lots of excess space. All right. Where is your, I even have a floor. That's good.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Julia Richter with JFO. As the chair mentioned, I have put together a couple of charts to help the committee understand the excess spending threshold. So this is included in the yield bill. You'll recall that it's currently suspended through FY 2029, and the yield bill repeals that suspension to make it essentially go back in
And
place.
that was done to not penalize winners. I believe when we did the weighting, there was a concern that schools that suddenly got, we wanted them to spend the money for the new weighting, and we didn't want to have them running up against the threshold. So, but that is now done.
Right, so I can't speak to all of the intent. The other piece of that puzzle is the excess spending threshold that is currently in law in the green books that's suspended. And I, of course, like council should speak up if I say anything wrong or want to interject. But that's based off of the old pupil weighting formula. You'll recall that had equalized pupils and a different base amount. So this is changing that calculation so that it corresponds with Act 127 of the current law. So what I'm showing here, I'll share my screen. These charts are posted on the committee page under my name. Make that up.
I was gonna say, anyone can go across the hall and grab a folded chair. Even if you will find a more comfortable one, probably. Okay.
So what we're looking at here is a chart that shows the latest FY 25 forecasted per pupil spending by district. Or called per pupil spending as the education spending divided by long-term weighted ADM. So each one of these blue dots represents a school district forecasted FY 25 per pupil spending. The green line is the estimated excess spending threshold for FY 26, given our best available data at the moment. So the way that is calculated is it's taking the average as currently written in the yield bill in 8887. It's taking the average FY 25 per pupil spending, increasing that by inflation, and then multiplying that by 120%.
Somebody. Oh. There's a green. Yeah, is there a roll? That is not.
So that's
That's
become the part,
Somebody's problem.
like a reset ballot.
I think that's a roll.
No, the roll call is
Faster.
it's faster, it's different, that's the normal come to the Senate.
My apologies.
Maybe they were in recess, I don't know.
Right.
Okay.
Ashley will come tell us.
Shall I continue?
Keep going.
Okay, so that's what we're looking at here, so that the way that works is essentially it's saying any district per pupil spending above this green line, that per pupil spending above the green line is double taxed.
Double.
Just calling everyone back.
Oh, no.
Thank you.
That's a form. Okay.
So that's what's being presented in the yield bill. I was also asked to show, what it would look like if the excess spending threshold was 116% instead of 120%, which is an H887. So this dark green line is the House position, the House construct of the yield bill at 120%, and then this lighter green line is if you were to reduce it down to 116.
Okay, so the average is somewhere. Looks like the bulk is in there, the 13 to 14,000 student. How do we set the line?
So the line is set by calculating the. Okay, so the line is set by calculating the FY 25. This is what's written in the yield bill, calculating the average FY 25 per pupil spending,
Okay,
multiplying it by, increasing it by inflation, so that's using the NEEP inflator from FY 25 to FY 26, and then multiplying it by a certain percentage, and above that is what's double taxed.
okay,
So the percentage that we see here, the dark green line is what's currently in H887 of 120%.
okay.
The light green line I was asked to also include of 116%.
Okay. So. We've got 6, 7. Do we know who's the real co-buyer? Oh, I bet I know who it is. Senator Chitty.
I'm trying not to talk tonight, it's a long night, but I would love it if these dots were varying sizes, respecting the proportional size of the district, so that we could see if it's like really small districts that are down there versus really large districts. I don't know if that's an enhancement that could be in the future graphic. For that question.
I don't have that available now. I would need to go back and do that.
But do you have any sense of, are they the larger districts, do they skew more towards the likely trigger of the threshold penalty?
They're pretty distributed throughout the chart. I will also note that it's important to keep in mind that the blue dots that we're looking at here is the FY 25 forecasted spending, so this is not FY 26. So next year,
We could just.
school districts are going to be building their budgets with per pupil spending.
Right.
Which is not necessarily going to be in the same place as the blue dots in the graph that we are looking at now. We just don't know what school districts are gonna be building their budgets at next year.
Okay. Let's do it. All right. And we heard the governor say he would like more cost control, and I understand. One way we could do that is just lowering the green line.
So, I mean, by lowering the green line, you're saying a lower level of per pupil spending is going to. Lowering the green line means that a lower amount is gonna be where you start having that double tax.
Which is something I can support. My concern is, I've got 4 school districts, 3 of them were hammered, 3 of them more so by the pupil weights. And I just don't know if this excess spending threshold is more likely to trigger against them. I'm comfortable if it's a wide dispersion of size districts, but I really, just to represent my constituency, I don't know how I would stand without having
I
better
don't know
understanding
mine
of those represent. And
Um,
just to set it across, if those are all the big districts, then I just don't know if this is adjusting for the economies of scale that the larger districts
I
are.
can almost guarantee you that top one is small school. I'm pretty sure I know which one it is. unless-
So I don't have the data in front of me of what each one of these dots, I can't say, this dot is that district and this dot is that district, I would need to go back for that. I will say that it's not like all of the bottom districts are the biggest districts in the state and all the top districts are the smallest districts in the state. I'll also remind the committee of a few weeks ago, I presented a chart to the committee that showed the relationship or really lack of relationship between per pupil spending and size of the district. Recall that.
Not trying to be provincial, I just want to make sure there's a good spread and that there isn't some other adjustment factor like the size of district that compounds the.
Well, it's per pupil spending, so I don't know my local per pupil spending. Pretty sure not up at 16. I bet that there's one that had $44,000 came up this year. very small school.
You wanna get this out tonight and you're putting forward 116, I can support that, just knowing that I'd love that information before we vote on it on Tuesday, so that I could.
Well, it's going to approach on Tuesday, so it can always be modified. I don't think I'd feel comfortable taking it down much below that, but that would put more pressure next year on schools, which is one of our problems. When we're trying to find a catch, we don't know. We also apparently have competition for any of the waterfall money. So we were told this morning we could count it, but budget is not set as of this evening, at least the last word I had. And it was the waterfall money in contention, so. We have been asked to raise, Ashley's gone. Enough money to bring the tax rate down to 12.5, I think, and that was if we raised 27,000.
Right, so this is the same outlook that I presented to the committee yesterday. You'll recall that the House version of the yield bill has the cloud tax, which is estimated to raise about 20 million, and the short-term rental 1.5% surcharge that raises about 6.5 million. That's the estimate. So that gives you roughly 27 million that the House included in calculating yield. So if you want to get to 12.5% average bill increase, that is the 27 that the House raised plus 25, so 52 million. Gets you to an average bill change of 12.5%. And that's calculating a uniform average bill change of 12.5%. If you want to include that property tax credit bump that the committee has discussed, and that was included in the House version, that's an additional 20 million, and the House construct raises that 20 million on non-homestead.
And they read it on non-homestead. I think we all may have heard from the affordable housing people, the word is out. They would like to be reduced to 5%. It would cost 1.8 million, but Julia's looked into it, and to start cutting things out of the tax category gets amazingly difficult.
Yeah, so I think that there's, with respect to the mechanics of that proposal, that caps the tax rate for certain properties at 5%. I think there are significant mechanic potential issues on that, so you have to think about, we've got our two rates right now, so some questions, and this is really, I think, a better question for the tax department, has to do with, or the clerks, 10 towns differentiate that? Are those properties clearly differentiated on the grand list? What about properties that are partially qualified but not fully qualified? How do those tax rates work together?
We have a lot of mixed income apartments, X% low income. So that would be, the fully subsidized, they know because they're capped at what they can. They know they can't appraise at market value, so they know that. But there's a lot. The condos that Down Street have done in Montpelier, there's some market rate and some subsidized. So I can see where that would get difficult.
And just in terms of modeling that and calculating that, I don't know how that rate would be calculated. Those properties would need to be broken out. And then with respect to just the mechanics of putting out those tax bills to property taxpayers, I don't know if that would work.
And it would also hit the local tax rates. The other, the House they raised it to 18%. If we get this down to 12, we're raising it to the 15%. It would have been, anyway, budgets are coming in a little lower. But we can always not smooth the bump. There's still the question of if we raise that property tax credit this year and we subsidize it to smooth the bump, then what happens next year when you're supposed to get the payment for that bump? If we give you an extra 1,000 in your tax credit and next year we have to rework the formula and figure out what base to do it on next year.
The way that the language in the yield bill is drafted does say that one-time increase to the property tax credit shall not be considered for the purpose of the commissioner's December 1st letter. So it's basically saying this is a one-time increase to the property tax credit, don't consider it when solving for those uniform average bill changes.
But next year, when we go to calculate the property tax credit, it will be based on this year's property tax bill. And if that bill has gone up 12%, you get, depending on all the mechanics, but for simplicity, a 12% increase in your payment. But we've already given you that 12% this year, so we'd have to set up a new calculation. I'm sure they could do it, but it would be a divergence. There's a couple divergence in here from the norm. One is the second home tax, the meal rooms tax, 1.5% increase. Rooms and meals are divided between clean water, general fund, and here. The House has given all of that second home increase to the ed fund. But again, that starts complicated tax calculations because some of the rooms and meals is going to be divided 3 ways and some of it isn't. If we divide it, we only get 2 point something million out of it, not the 6 point something that we were looking at.
But if it's a temporary surcharge, this can be directed entirely to the ed fund.
We do anything we want.
So as is included in the House passed yield bill, the 1.5% surcharge on short-term rentals is fully dedicated to the education fund.
Okay. So this evening, we're gonna cross our fingers and hope that we get 25 million from the waterfall. That's still being debated. Well, sure tonight, but we'll probably get something. What they've asked us to do is raise the 27 that the House raised. And if we want to smooth out the bump, then we need to raise another 20. The House did it by taxing all non-residentials. We currently pick up affordable housing in that. And they've said since they can't raise the rates because the rent is capped, it's the percentage of their income, that they are going to be left holding the bill, and they don't, other than building housing, they don't have a lot, they don't have a slush fund for this, so and cutting them out would be technically very difficult. So we've got the cloud tax. Ted is here. Do you want to officially tell us? Because we would think if maybe we'd have 10, 12 million. Do you want to tell us what we really will have? This is feel like the price is right.
I will not ask any, for the record, I'm not during fiscal office, I will not ask anyone to come on down because I'm the next contestant. And so looking at the language, that was based on Maryland, both Kirby and I talked about it, and it seemed like that would correspond to pretty much all business use of cloud services. In our model, we show a 40% consumer usage of cloud and 60% business usage of cloud, and so the estimate is 8.1 billion in revenue for fiscal year 25, for the first year of implementation.
Okay. So that's where we are. When we get beyond that, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing, just in the complexity of the computer system. There, how all these things mesh together. I don't know. The tax commissioner said his lawyers were gonna talk to our lawyers. Tax commissioner's back here. Yes, did you get to talk to your lawyers? Can they,
I would look at the lawyers.
you look at the lawyer? Who's your lawyer? Oh, that, no. Did the lawyers talk to each other? I mean, can you differentiate in the cloud enough to tax them? Could you figure out if we taxed everything? What it would look like?
So for the record, Abby Shepherd, I'm with the Department of Taxes. We did get a chance to look at the language and generally have the same sense of this is really challenging because there aren't clearer definitions for those different types of cloud software. So that is, as we've shared with Ledge Council, that is one of our concerns. I think looking at Rhode Island and Maryland, not Massachusetts, so there are some examples there. But I'm not sure if you have more specific questions.
No, I think. I think we could draft it so it had Maryland's definitions. I just want to make sure you think that would be adequate if that's where we went.
As I think the department has testified to in the past, we are anticipating that there will certainly be some new regulations and potentially appeals of the language, just to clarify, because it is so challenging to actually define these.
Well, I think just listening to the testimony that we had, and it wasn't a large amount. It sounds like we're either gonna do this small carve out, or we're going to tax every time a computer, somebody pays to have something put in from one computer to another computer. And it sounded like that could be very expensive to the businesses involved. And if we're gonna start it July 1st, I don't know if we're giving them enough time, never mind you enough time to ramp this up.
I'm happy to speak to that part, Madam Chair.
Okay, yes.
For the record, Craig Bolton, Tax Commissioner. With a change like this in something like sales tax, that won't be a form change. It would just be an instructions change.
Mhm.
But I am appreciative of you flagging things like outreach. Those are things that we've got to do, ramp up compliance efforts. So we don't have to build a new form for this, but yeah, there would be outreach efforts there. And I think potential compliance ramp up as well.
Okay. Okay, so Sarah Chit.
I know, Ted, we had this conversation in the hallway and Kirby is here. Massachusetts, I thought came up multiple times is also another model, but do you find that to be as open to or as similar effect as Maryland?
Kirby Key, Legislative Council. I didn't look specifically at Massachusetts. Ted and I looked at. I asked the lady, by the way, from Maryland that you asked for yesterday. And then I also took a stab at a different approach of trying to call out specific infrastructure as a service type things. Ted and I had a discussion though, it actually found that to be less workable actually than the Maryland language that I was asked to do. I think something like Iowa can be copied, but Iowa is just pretty much all business to business stuff. And it would be probably easier for the department to administer that through the interpretation of it, because there's less decision-making involved. But I think it would be probably as big of, if not a bigger revenue hit than the one that Ted was talking about before. We did that.
Okay, it would be a revenue hit to us or to the
It
business.
would, I think Ted mentioned that, that the Maryland language I had drafted, was 8 million revenue. So maybe even less than that if we took an Iowa approach.
Oh, so we get less than 8 if we took an.
I mean, I don't want to speak for Ted, I don't think that's what's been done, this is speculative.
Okay. Okay,
My concern is if we do the full cloud thing, we will be the 8th state to do this when there are 21 others that just do SaaS. And the concerns are that can drive a lot of people to, especially economic drivers, growing innovative companies. You need money, so I don't think there are easy answers here. I wonder where the rest of the committee is. I mean, if we're all just resolved to tax cloud, or if we want to look for alternatives to.
we can look for
place.
any alternatives and. Ted, you got alternative? I know joint fiscal's been working on alternatives. I think we saw a lot of them last, when you're taxing someone, something, anything. Nobody likes it. And it's never pleasant. Maybe I could think of some things I'd like to tax that might make it pleasant, but they haven't come up yet. And so, Ted, do you want to switch with Julia and give you the comfortable seat for a few minutes? I think that's better than the folding chairs.
Well, that one has a pad, so.
Yeah, that one isn't
Yeah,
too bad.
now.
Somehow we've got to drive a cage to switch out all the hard chairs for soft ones after everyone's gone home sometime.
I could do that.
You can do, okay, that's your assignment, Senator. You only want soft chairs in here. Okay,
So for the record, again, Ted Burnett, Joint Fiscal Office, working from the new and lower revenue amount that would be generated from a Maryland style taxation of pre-written software access remotely. Since the revenue amount is $8.1 million, the difference from the House means that there's a $12.3 million difference if the committee would want to get to the 27 million that the House raised through their two revenue pieces non-property tax revenue pieces in the yield bill. There are 3 separate options here. One is if you looked at the kind of continuing similar conversations we've had in here, increasing the rooms tax and allocating the full amount of increase to the education fund would be approximately 12.3 to be $12.9
that
million.
would be everyone's, all.
All rooms, yes.
Right, which I think last night, somebody got us a list, and that was at 1%, 1.5, and we definitely be the highest. In New England, New York comes in at 4, but every county in New York has a separate tax rate on top of that. But, and that's something to consider in a state that relies for a good part of its income from the tourist trade. Okay,
Sure, so option number 2 would be a further STR surcharge increase. And so to generate approximately $12.3 million, you would have to add another 3%, which would bring the STR surcharge to 4.5%. Right, because the 1.5 generated 6.5, so
okay.
you have to bring it to 3. Other options, kind of pulling from some of the other sales tax pieces, looking at removing the exemption on clothing over $110 and adding the estimate on candy.
Went to 150 last night just to inflate it for 10 years. It's a sales tax.
Yes, and the consideration right with that, yes, you have some cross-border issues as well, and so yes, there's a full set of considerations there
I
that would go with
find
that piece.
the short-term rental one interesting. I mean, it's clean.
I'm also not opposed to the clothing. I could be persuaded otherwise, but $150 is where I thought you were thinking last night.
Well, that would give it an inflation, but I don't know, did you manage to reach anybody from the streamlined sales tax?
Kirby Keegan, Legislative Council, I did.
Okay.
I was able to verify, both from the governing board and also I just checked myself the agreement. And, the clothing approach is totally fine. While I was there, I checked in on the cloud computing exemption though, and that's more ambiguous. So if we have, and I asked for some feedback from the governing board on that. And that was a hard turnaround in one day for them though,
Yeah.
because
okay.
it was a less obvious of a question. So I haven't heard any final word about that. I think what I would advise is if we end up doing it, it may be something where we hear from Streamline next year and some corrections need to be made.
Okay,
That would be,
okay.
there is potential trouble with Streamline.
I mean, given the number of states that have done what we're doing, I'm assuming, what have we got, 21 states?
The thing is that
It might not be that.
the states we've been looking at
Yeah.
that have exemptions or carve outs for things for cloud
Mhm.
are not Streamline states. Maryland's not, Massachusetts is not, Rhode Island is. New York is not, I mean,
And New York,
so,
New York doesn't turn compacts either, it's a world unto itself. Like Texas and California. Okay. So we can take that, what we're really trying to do is buy down this year's tax rate. So we can say, by the time we get caught, next year, we're gonna have to do this all over again. And I hope that we're banking on, by next year, we're gonna have some proposals. Which we will still have issues next year. I really don't think. Just given what I've heard hinted about health insurance. Which was one of the main drivers this year. I don't think it's going away next year. I think we're gonna see some significant increases, but we won't.
Well, I know the estimate for health insurance increases, we should see the result of that fairly soon. I know that our guesstimate is that, again, it's another high increase.
Yeah.
But remember, we just passed the bill that eliminates
Yes, we have already told you.
some of the stuff, and that will increase it further.
Probably not this year, but it will next year.
Prior opposition bill that has some
Yeah.
other provisions in it will cause insurers to need additional software, and that software increase should raise medical costs perhaps substantially if we have the Medicaid stuff. I think it's still in there
No,
in comparison.
the committee didn't do it.
So just because I want to move us.
Yes,
This is-
everybody would like to go home.
But good company and happy to order the pieces. So I would support the SAS and PASS. So I'm assuming that since you put it up here, that you have some language that could exempt infrastructure as a service.
I unfortunately have to clarify with that. I think Kirby and I would really have to put our heads together. We don't currently have language on infrastructure as a service. This is mostly put together in looking at some sort of, if there were hypothetically a cloud exemption that was a smaller universe and just hit the infrastructure as a service, but we talked about it today, and as many folks have mentioned, the definitions on it is challenging.
I think if we don't have language, it's gonna be difficult to vote this out tonight. I think we're gonna have to come in on Monday and vote it out. I don't wanna do something that's this complex and rush it and find out we really messed it up when the tax department tries to do it. And I'd like their lawyers to talk with our lawyers to make sure we do it correctly. So we are talking about, where's my chart from yesterday? Okay, it was here a few minutes ago. Just doing software as a service, which is cloud-based. No, I'm not finding.
SAS and PASS.
SAS and PASS, we Can you speak? Yeah,
Software
I
as,
like it's this chart,
Yeah.
and we're doing that section,
The-
which is software.
that 15.2 million would be platform as a service and software as a service. Infrastructure as a service is what many companies will pay when they just don't wanna buy the equipment, buy the.
This is
Just
where
what it is.
you have you have a payroll program that does your payroll. That's software as a service. Are we doing anything as a platform as a service?
Assuming we can get language, that second option has revenue just excluding infrastructure as a service. And so it would back then by an inference and based on the percentages you gave previously, that would tax 2 of the 3 categories of cloud services. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and for just another point of consideration, there is software as a service is about half the market. And so if you were to just decide to tax software as a service, that would be instead of 8.1 million to be roughly 10. I'd have to go and put, the 10 point something on it, but I think, there's the difference is roughly, so infrastructure as a service and platform as a service are primarily business focused.
Yes.
And then software as a service has a split between consumer and business use, and so it's really considered. So
That's where we
yeah.
started this with TurboTax Online. So we are not taxing everything in this software. What are we got, what are we getting 8? What's not, if doing all of this gets 10, then what are we leaving out of this?
So it would be the business, so the way the Maryland exemption is created, it exempts a lot of business. So it's anything on an enterprise computer system. And so it's not the type of product necessarily, it's that then comes down to the use and whether it's able to be accessed by multiple computers. And that's generally how businesses use this type of software. They have multiple licenses.
That run within their office.
Mhm.
This would be if they contract with, I think the example was given a couple times, a payroll program. And they beat stuff up and then checks get spread out and sent back kind of thing.
I
Money.
put it this way, you just don't get individual consumers buying platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. It's businesses that are paying for that to then design their own software that works with other software to then sell other products and services.
Okay.
Well,
So
one
we
of the
just did
issues that's been raised by business consistently is the desire not to add multiple taxation on what essentially is the same item.
Yeah.
So the issue is exempting business to business sales as opposed to business to end user sales. Now, how on earth you would measure that? Because who's the end user? The end user is not just an individual. The end user could be the business, but doesn't use it for business.
Yeah, I mean, that, when you put ingredients in a machine and ice cream comes out the other end,
Straight
it's
business.
a lot
business
easier to
exclude,
figure it out.
You know, as opposed to business to consumer. The consumer is an individual, you can recognize the consumer is an LLC, actually it's an individual who uses it for business. So,
I just am curious how far we do want to get today.
I've been told we have to get this bill out today.
Okay, so I think we should maybe call the question software as a service. Just gonna put that on the table
Do the
at 10 million. Is that was without any further complicated
Can
exemption?
that be done?
I would defer to Kirby. I don't want to speak for a whole other regime. It would be different than the Maryland exemption.
But there are 20 or more states who tax software as a service, like.
Google list, 21.
Okay, so for clarity, there's 20, I believe there's 21 states that tax pre-written software accessed remotely, the tax the cloud,
Yeah,
like that's 21's the total
right.
number. And I know, I think that there was some testimony about how many of them fully tax all aspects of it. Ted had that testimony. So, but being said, anyways, I didn't give that testimony because I'm not aware.
Right.
I'm not aware of exactly how that.
Okay.
And I find it very hard to say with certainty how it's divided up because
like-
the sales tax
Yeah,
system.
is there a pretty like package streamline definition we could use of pre-written software access remotely?
Yes, there is definitions from Streamline, Vermont uses them. Um. As far as allowable exceptions in this area, I haven't had a lot of time today to dive deeply into that, but it is discussed in Streamline sales tax.
So we do software as a service.
But I did not find, to be clear, anything that would let us easily carve out under Streamline the things that are being discussed.
Right,
So
so
something I've found at this point.
Okay,
should we try to say we wanna do like a low carve out, no carve out software as a service, $10 million? And at least while you all are making sure that's workable, we look at 12 million. We need to find, I just wanna
Well,
kind of like,
we need to get to
Grasp
27, if we can do that and
Okay.
get the definitions, I think you can say that's what we're going to do, software as a service. Look at the other 21 states and find definitions that the tax department can do.
Give me scenarios here. What are we talking about out there in the world, okay?
You use a computer service on the cloud, you use TurboTax and you keep your books on the cloud. Some businesses use a computer program in the cloud to do their payroll. So they plug in the hours and all the
Do I
computing
pay
and all.
tax on Google? I have Google. I pay tax.
I don't know, no,
So-
Google is not a service. Yeah.
Ted's testimony from Tuesday, this is your slide deck, so these are examples, of software as a service.
Yeah.
So Google's now charging me $20 a year for photos that I post up there, that's software as a service, because I'm paying for it. Noom, I lost 70 pounds in Noom, that is software as a service that I did not pay tax on, that would be software as a service, really consumer software. The other types of software, I think is to your point, Senator McCormick, is platform as a service. Yeah, the example is Squarespace, but I think a better one is Amazon Web Services. Have you heard of Julian Assange? Do you remember the big controversy over that big platform WikiLeaks that he had?
Yeah,
That was software that he ran on Amazon Web Services, that just this service software that just hosted out, allowed people to anonymously upload content. That was just that he paid for that to be on there, to then this server that would host out that content and collect it anonymously and then make it available to other people. So he paid Amazon Web Services to just put a platform, this web application posted on that space. And they managed all of the management of the operating system, the virus software, the maintenance, monitoring for updates. That's what Amazon Web Services does. Usually businesses do that. Up and coming growing businesses, they can't afford to actually physically buy a server, dedicate a space, plug cabling in, pay for broadband services, cool the space. So instead, they just pay per month to Amazon Web Services for the platform. Then they build products that run electronically there and sell those products, which then they pay sales tax. So if we tax platform as a service, we'd be taxing twice. We'd be taxing that input and then that input would be taxed again.
I think a lot of the companies I deal with probably would go, but what, I don't know if I do. I leave all the finances to my wife. Again, I've got Netflix. What would I be paying a tax for Netflix?
Already pay tax on
Already
Netflix.
paid that.
It's not counted as a
We're paying
software.
sales tax and we just put a gross receipts tax on, so your bill's going up. That was a month.
Well, why does Netflix have the tax and these other things?
Because
Don't
it
know how much
isn't
they
soft,
cost.
you're buying movies, you're buying. Same way you buy the cable channel and you get the local news, or you buy Netflix, you're buying a service, just like I buy books online. You pay a tax on it because you're buying something.
Sales tax.
Yeah,
How much
because
you
you're
buy.
buying something tangible, it shows up on your computer. But yeah, you're buying the Netflix, the ability to read you're buying something tangible, you're buying a movie. The ability to watch many movies, and you pay them so much a month, and included in your bill is the sales tax.
But that's already,
That's already taxed. This would hit more business users or some of our sophisticated children.
And I relate to all this the way my mother related to the car.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know the
But-
2 feet just one at a time.
Okay, so just don't understand who we tax. What I'm looking for is that the more different things you tax and the more people you tax, the less each tax bill is. You know, and it's a little bit less anger, right?
If you are trying to raise X amount of money, the bigger your pool to raise it, the
Yeah.
lower. This one, we're charging a straight 6% sales tax, other states charge lower. But this year, we're doing this because we need money to buy down the property tax rate, so we don't increase the homeless problem in Vermont.
I fear that a lot of the people I get complaints from do not fully get that. If you lower this tax, you're gonna raise that tax.
No.
But I think they won't, not what we want are taxes, that they're not gonna hate as much as they hate.
They're not
very
gonna
high
hate-
tax
They're
on
not
their
gonna
home.
hate this one, no. That's what we're doing. We are trying to buy down their home. We're gonna get them down, if we do our job tonight, to somewhere between 12 and 13 cents. If we could salvage the 25 million from the waterfall that we're working on. So if we're gonna do the 8.1 here and the 12.4 on this third charge, yes.
So I believe that 8.1 is with the Maryland language, but I think what I also heard is that if we can direct our legislative council to really target on just taxing SaaS and find one of the 21 states in the streamlined service
Okay,
agreement
so
to
we've
model it
got
after
10.
there and be 10.
We've got 22.4 at
And that-
this point.
And that would support the clothing at 150 for another 5.6, and I'm also open to candy at 3.7.
I'm
I'm just putting out there.
we get into yogurt covered, whatever. I'll have Jim Harrison come down and do his routine, get his bag, and what is this? And it's chocolate covered raisins or yogurt covered raisins to be, it gets hard.
Maybe we could look at all the,
We
are
had,
there 2 scenarios, are there more?
So this, I mean, I think the other one, part of this is being, I want to preface, kind of scrolling down to the next one, is looking at it from the eyes of a fiscal analyst as opposed to someone who's a tax administrator or a lawyer. And so there are certain terms that make sense to me and are baked into my estimate that are readily accessible for me, but I think are way more challenging to find the right definition for and implement. And so, yes, the second one would show if you were able to come up with language that only gets it, that only exempts infrastructure as a service, but I don't, I think that, that language isn't drafted, and so.
I can't see the bottom.
Yes, and so that would be a hypothetical consideration, but there's currently no language for it, and, it would require some time, and Kirby can speak to kind of the crafting part of that.
difference from the down, okay.
I
I'm
think
not
that
sure
there
what
isn't language
it's the bottom one on the line.
for that. Isn't there? There are other states that do tax only the two, is that right? Platform as a service and the software delivered remotely.
They are, however, they're not streamlined states.
I feel like, so, I feel like by talking about infrastructure as a service and platform as a service in sales tax context, when that's not how the laws are actually written, is kind of like,
Mhm.
we're speaking Egyptian here, when what we're trying to do is have something in English, so, that's what I'm struggling with a little bit personally, and, totally open if there's ideas out there for ways to write this, but we can take a stab at something. We could take a stab at identify specifically what infrastructure as a service is and exempting specifically those
Yeah.
things. And then the lovely people at Department of Taxes will have to then try to administer that.
Interest,
For instance, an exemption that says pre-written software accessed remotely for server storage and networking that's managed by a vendor. there's a lot of stuff in what I just said there that would require further interpretation. But I believe that would overlap with what Ted is presenting about IAAS there within the second option.
Okay, right now, we're looking at 8.1, and that's for now, if we do all software as a service, and can we draft that with any amount of clarity so it can be enforced?
The 8.1 is for language that Kirby's already drafted that would
Okay.
reflect Maryland's exemptions,
Right.
which you all looked at. And that in our kind of after confirming about it,
Yeah.
that corresponds with business use of the cloud, and it would primarily exempt business enterprise use of the cloud, and so that's where we ended up at $8.1 million in.
That's the simplest
Clear.
way to do it right now. We have another state, we've got their definitions. And it sounds like the more we dig into it, the more complicated it gets. And I think it's gonna be complicated enough. So if we can do that, do we wanna do the 3% increase and dedicate it all to which gets us 12. So we're at 20.
And
We're gonna need to raise 7 or 8 more.
so this 3% is in addition to the 1.5 STR that's in the house, so we bring them
Oh,
up to 4.5.
Oh,
Yeah,
That's too much.
uh,
So the 1.5, so when you consider, well, 1.3, that's over in your other option, that is over and above
that is
what's already in the house.
This is, yes, working kind of from the work yesterday that seemed to leave the house SDR 1.5 in place. And so, yes, these would be additional.
this would be additional.
Yes, and looking at kind of changing,
So,
exploring different cloud facilities.
so if we just did a 3%, not a 4.5%, we'd have to take their 6 million from the 12 million here.
So you would need to raise an additional 5. Yes. If you're using the example from
If-
Maryland.
If they did 1.5 and they raised 6.8 and we raised it 3% on top of it, so, all right, so we've got 12.4 plus the 6, you've got 18 there.
That would be 18.
So
And-
what if we just did an additional 2? That would get us something around 3.
I would have to, so in presenting these, I would want to go, I don't prefer not to do math in the stand, but I could go back and,
I don't
Certainly
know
look at it.
that all with a calculator, so,
yes.
Okay,
Yeah, that would just be, you know,
But
from
we've got
a chart, it'd be-
and 8.
it would be just clear if we saw what the total amount, somewhere on what the total amount the consumer would be paying for all these activities at one time with the change. We could see what the premium is that would be for what we do, but then if we count the houses stuff, I think it'd be useful to see this is the total amount of what it would look like on a consumer's bill.
Yeah,
That'd be very helpful.
Can I ask a
That
question?
would be very helpful.
Was your clothing exemption written like Massachusetts or other states where it's the amount over the limit?
It's so the exemption would apply, you would pay sales tax on the amount over a
Okay,
certain amount, yes.
so it's still raised, so if you're saying,
Or sorry, the exemption would, I had it backwards, yeah.
The way it's drafted, the language I have drafted is, if the item is worth. Or if the sales price for an article of clothing is, in this case, I was asked to do 150. If the sales price for an article of clothing is more than $150, the way I wrote it, then sales tax applies to the entire price.
oh,
I think before we did it on the amount over.
yeah, just Massachusetts does the amount over, which is probably a much lesser amount, but seems
When I was selling $300 sweaters, I did it, I think, on $200. I owed sales taxes.
Right.
In Massachusetts.
So, right, if you're a little bit over buying $170 coat,
That takes,
it's not, it doesn't get us.
it doesn't get us probably enough money
Yeah.
to make it worth doing, which we
Right.
run into.
Right, that almost, exactly, that almost rules out doing it. If like, I think most other states, they just do give out over.
I'm looking for a calculator. Why does
It's not kind of like you buy something for 155 and that.
So. Figure it out, who's got a calculator, because my iPad doesn't have one. If you've got $150 a night B&B bill, and we put a 4.5% on that,
How much was the per night?
150. Well, I think it may be in the median, some of them are what, over 200. All right, what are we adding to your bill?
$6.75.
That's not gonna stop anyone. And it's nowhere near my $200 cleaning bill.
It's a grumbler. And some will grumble over
Yeah.
that, some people, will, but they'll pay it and they won't not come back.
You look at what other states put on a hotel bill, or cities, or the local things that are on there, yeah, they won't. $6 is not gonna stop. It might stop the $100,000 wedding people if we put it on the whole thing. Okay, so we've got 8 and we've got 12. So we've got 20. We need to make $7 million more.
I'll just say I'm not enthusiastic about the short-term rental tax. I'd rather tax tobacco or vapes. But, and I'm amazed we went from 1.5 to 3% somehow. But if that is the will of the majority, I certainly am not gonna argue about it for the next
I
hour.
think the number I got was that vapes would make us about $1 million.
Well, that was 8%, not higher. vape tax.
It was 8%.
It
I
is.
thought it was going up.
So to move the tax on vapes from the current 92% on wholesale cost to 100%.
Yeah. that's
Would,
what-
yes, would,
I was talking about more, I mean, if we were about to ban it, I think you could raise the price and cut more youth out of the market, and if you doubled it, you get another 15 million.
Yeah, move the tax on vapes.
They are seeing, I mean, really, they're a problem, like, I don't
They
know.
are a problem. There are also adults that are using them to step down from cigarettes. I don't think you were in here, but we did take that testimony. And we had one guy who had moved his shop across the border to New Hampshire. They had like a general store.
yes, and for any large magnitude of tax increase, I would have to, right, you mentioned elasticity, right, that would be a factor in large jumps.
It would be, yeah, if 8% is $1 million, it would be a very large chunk for that to bid. Okay. So we need,
Thought this might help some of our decision making to get to the magic numbers. So what we have here are the different options. SAS for 10 million, YAS for 5 million, PASS for 5.
I have no idea what SAS, AS and PAS.
I would say that
SaaS is software.
these are well-defined industry terms. I am
Okay.
confident in our legislative council that if you told them we want to tax SAS and with the work of tax.
That's
commission,
what we're taxing, right?
So,
Is with some business exemptions.
so if we took those two out, if we took YAS and PASS out.
Right.
we
Why would you
raise
take
the-
them out?
Because they're very, very complicated and they're very expensive for some of your small businesses that don't.
I guess I'm approaching this as that I am what my conservative constituents accuse me of being, which is you never met a tax you didn't like. But again, my sense is the more different things we tax, the less of a tax increase each one of them is. And the more different people we tax, the less of the tax increases on any particular people.
Well, this one is gonna hit businesses, so unless your conservative constituents run a computer business, they're probably not gonna see it. We did the short-term rental at 1.5.
I did 2 lines so that if you only wanted to do one, that's what we would get.
Wait, 1.5, and you wanna double it 1.5 again, which would get us to 3.
And some comments, just the SDR surcharge is 6.5, so there's some, so I would, yeah, for each 1.5, it's roughly 6.5, although at 3%, there's a little bit of elasticity wiggle room, it's not perfectly 6.5% for each one.
None of this is perfect, and we won't know until the money comes in if it works.
Yes, and to be clear that when you're talking about SaaS, that is different from the currently drafted Maryland
Yes.
business, and there's a revenue difference there.
Okay. So if we do clothing over 150 and we do 3% on short-term rental, we double what the house did. We're 28.6, so I'm gonna look at staff to verify that. Can we go with that and get, oh, you took candy in there.
But I dropped, so the 0 means it's not included, but if you wanna throw candy in there, we get.
No,
that.
no, I don't. I'm trying not to
Same
get
candies for
lower
profit.
income people with
Sure.
taxes.
Candy can be high calorie. And have lots of.
So
people-
can't Champlain chocolate.
No, yeah, so I'm just saying, like, I don't think it's a good way to get 3.5 million, it just doesn't feel like.
Is,
Candy's gone.
I've been eating candy as a meal.
We could talk about sugar sweet beverage tax, but I feel that there's a year lag.
Yeah, there's, it's FY26.
this to get through this year. It'll probably be to get us through a couple of years, because when we get to the really important part of this, we're going to have to, it's gonna take a while to change our educational structure, I think.
And for clarity, the short-term rental tax is over and above the sales tax, is that correct?
Over and above the rooms tax.
The room tax. I
Yes.
mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a surcharge on short-term.
Clarity.
I would say.
I was just gonna say, I don't see Molly in the room from the ski association. If there was a way, we have a property tax category for ski condos. I wish-
Owned by a management company.
Right, what frustrates me is there are a lot of things that function as timeshares and very high value short-term rentals that would not be taxed and we'd be, adding a 3% just on based on the platform that's used, not if they use a management
I
company.
think we heard there is a group. You join whenever you stay in one of their hotels, you get points, you get enough points, you get to stay free. It was a little brouhaha, because I believe it was Smugs. Canceled a non-member's reservation because a member wanted that room with the eclipse night. One of my children went to one of their open houses, you get to stay for free in their resort to be subject to marketing. And you get 1,500 free points. So every time it's a marketing membership kind of thing. And the testimony was, this one group was, when we were looking at the value or lack thereof of timeshares, because you can't sell your timeshares. This group had, I think, bought the lodge and was buying up timeshares. That's what we're not going to hit here. And if their members don't want it, then the rest of us can rent it. But I'm not sure how it's classified. Does anyone from the tax department know how those? We've been told that if you have something like that, where it's under management of an organization, even if they rent out condos or rooms that they don't fall under the rooms and meals, or they don't, that somehow we're not gonna hit them if we do this.
Are you referring to claims that the short-term rental surcharge as it's written would not apply to those situations?
That,
Is that what you
did we
mean?
hear that the rooms and meals tax didn't apply to them also? I'd just like to be clear on that. I don't think this will hit them because they must come under the definition of lodging, just like this.
So for the rooms
Right.
tax, it would be whether they're an operator, and I'm not hearing anything that sounds like they would not be an operator.
Yeah, it wasn't the rooms, I mean, Hawaii has like an actual timeshare tax, I think, to get at the difference between a longer term stay than a hotel room.
Oh, is that what it is, like the stays of 30 days or more?
No, I'm not talking about stays of 30 days or more, but just booking a hotel room and hitting the, and versus a timeshare in a ski condo, et cetera. That because it's run by the larger management company.
Yeah, we heard last
It's
week that
by this tax.
town, I think Cambridge lost $20 million in grand list. Because there was a lawyer that went to the ski areas and told, how much can you sell your timeshare for? You couldn't sell it for $200. And so they forced the town, because the town couldn't take the risk of losing. We did some fixing on that, but what it sounded like was that this operating group was slowly buying up those timeshares at a very good price, and then, because they were condos and they were exactly the same as the condo next door, and yet the market value
Because it
was
was a timeshare.
nothing. Yeah,
Yeah, the timeshare value was
Yeah.
rock bottom, even though it was next door to the condo that was selling on the real estate market. And what they were doing, this particular firm, was buying timeshares, and once they had enough timeshares, they were using them as short-term rentals. And were able to do so at a low per unit cost, because the timeshare couldn't be sold readily in the open market.
right.
So they, I mean, in a sense, they are short-term rentals, but they're not gonna fall under this tax.
At this
So,
point.
oh, it depends, I guess. how
When we
right.
have more time, we can look at the new marketing structures. And what we can do, because this does seem, used to be timeshares, now it seems to be points. And you get, I mean, all the major motel chains have become a member and you do points. This is, just seems to be a new variation of that. Okay, so. We are at 28, if we do 3%, oh, you, and the clothing. Oh, but you've put another 10 million in there. For. Other cloud taxes,
So if I may,
yeah,
this bundle, so with the zeros, that means we would not be
Okay.
including those.
okay,
So this would just be SaaS. We raised 10 million, which is green, and we did, if we were going down this path, and I will say. I support taxing short-term rentals because I do, especially for this, I feel a rational connection. They are contributing to our reduced housing stock, and they're not playing on an equal footing or equal playground with the.
I have fire, water testing and.
So I would support both 1.5 or 3% total, and then clothing above 150 is there. These are the other options, and a very smart person caught me on the way out in the building last night and said, rather than mess with the tax stabilization thing, they suggested maybe if we just raise the state sales tax of 0.2%, but can we raise the sales tax 0.2%? I mean, aren't the receipts always calculated on whole percentages?
For those of us that have to calculate it.
Yeah.
It would be challenged, that's why I always took my daughter to shows when I was working the circuit. Because they could do it in their head. I can
just-
do 0.5.
I was in
Get
JFO
to 0.3,
presentation.
I'm in trouble.
I-
I mean, that would, I've never seen anything that wasn't 0.5.
Not against, they're not saying, but just, this is Patrick Titterton's slide, I don't know if we
Yeah.
can actually do.
But the sales tax is regressive.
Yeah, yeah.
And as little I don't mind clothing over $150. I will become a coach on how you can dress your family for under $150 an item. That will be my retirement. Footwear. Rewritten software we're doing.
Can I just, I'm with the tax commissioner.
Yeah.
I'm looking on the Vermont tax website, Department of Taxes website. And it says under short-term rentals, it gives the definition of, 4 days, not 30 consecutive days. And then it says the following is a non-inclusive list of types of lodging rented or owned by the host, which fall under the provisions of the law. House or rooms in a house, cabin, cottage, condominium, ski lodge, barn, bunkhouse, treehouse, camper, tent. So I just want to make, they are called short-term rental ski lodges, but and I don't think even if they're managed in terms of somebody helping you rent them, why that would mean they're exempt. So would you consider ski lodges non-exempt from paying this 3%?
Isn't the definition that if they're regulated under Title 18? So I don't know offhand if they are or not, but
Okay.
like that list is just the definition of rooms tax operator, right? And so we're just grabbing all of.
Oh, this is short-term rent.
Yeah, so if you.
Yeah, but right
Yeah.
now, short-term rentals are just rooms tax operators like
Right,
everybody
right.
else. There's not a different rate.
Yeah,
So I don't think it matters as much for like that informational stuff on the website, but I don't know offhand if those are regulated under Title 18.
But what we
Okay.
heard last night is if they're regulated by the Department of Health, then the woman from the Red Barn hired her water manager.
Yeah.
And, I mean, water had to be tested twice a year. I told you ad nauseum about the house that was being rented that failed the water test when it was being sold.
Fully support exempting those, if they're regulated to that degree and they qualify in that,
Yeah.
because they are meeting health standards.
right. No, I'm fine with that. I just don't want our, like, given that this is a new area, I don't want our measure of if they're short-term rental to be they're on Airbnb or not. You know, there's just a lot of,
That's.
so you were like
that's not it.
tracking short-term rentals beyond the major platforms.
We have a flag for filers for short-term rentals.
Uh-huh.
Again, it's informational right now.
Right,
But it's beyond major platforms, sure.
okay,
If you're operating on your own as an
Yeah.
operator, then you've got an obligation to file, and we do have a self-attestation right now.
okay, so you would be getting better information about categorizing short-term rentals potentially in the grant list.
I think, you mean with our existing data or with a language change?
Just like we're talking about second homes and.
No, I don't, the grand list doesn't list it as a short-term rental, they're gonna list it as. A homestead, are they gonna list it as a short-term rental?
I don't believe so. I would defer to the tax.
No, I didn't think so. Sometimes you're living in it, if it's your home and you're renting out the third floor. It's your home, you as an operator need to pay the tax. But I was impressed years ago when we first started talking about this, to find out the tax department was watching the newspapers. Where traditionally you would see, summer cottage for rent $300 a week. And they were informing them that they did indeed owe rooms and meals tax.
We just like to help people out, understand our
Yeah,
obligations.
That's right. They helped you have fun in the summer. So they track it, and now all the platforms are collecting.
Voluntarily.
Voluntarily.
No, that's law.
That's-
You guys
that's right.
put it in law.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
right, but that helps the person do it without
Yes.
doing it themselves.
Yeah, that's right. Online platforms are considered operators under the law, so they have to
Right.
collect and remit on behalf of hosts.
Right.
Could we do that with sales tax? Well, actually, if you sell online, they do with the big platforms. Yeah, do that.
Might the commissioner elaborate on what he understands to be regulated under Title 18? Are those all hotels and registered establishments that are meeting the health code?
I'm not sure I can speak to that with authority. I might look to Lynch counsel.
I can show you the definition.
I'd love to see it. I'm just kind of curious if that's the definition to address Senator Ron Hinsdale's very valid concerns that we don't want to get these ski resorts if they aren't regulated.
To be clear, that's how it's drafted. What's for you,
Mhm.
it's drafted to Title 18.
So not lodging establishment.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Right, okay.
And so those ski resorts can start to qualify as lodging establishments one way or the other. You think it's
They do.
ski lodges, okay,
But
great.
if they're renting, if Park Family Lodge is renting out a condo,
Sure.
or if they're renting it out. I can't imagine we have a ski resort that's not being regulated by the Department of Health. But the small selling the cabin, you know, the cabin in the backyard. Yeah, and she is like sales tax vendors responsible for collecting and remitting the state's taxes. It's owed by the person.
If I may make a point to one of Senator McCormick's previous comments, I hear you. I almost feel like this is doing what you're thinking of, which is spreading the taxes across lots of different
Yeah.
sources by going to SaaS, short-term rentals, clothing, so it's not hitting one pocket. And then if you don't do pass and yes this year, there's always next year, there's years down the road, so it's another pocket to reach into as much as.
So it's almost 6:30 and we have several sections of this bill to go through. Are we set on SAS at 10,000? The short-term rental at 4.5, because we're increasing it by 3. And clothing over 150.
It would be, so in this math here, it would be the short-term rental surcharge at 3%.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is looking at total,
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Down to it.
3%.
So there's nothing from the house that's over
It's
above that?
3% on top of 9%,
so, right, so this is,
the surcharge.
this is looking at it differently than what I was.
Right.
In that it is starting from ground zero.
Yeah.
Yes,
And so this would, right, so you're, from the difference from the houses, you're not raising as much revenue on SaaS, but you're doubling the short-term rental surcharge from 1.5 to 3%, and then adding clothing above.
if we are in fact at 38, we could drop that short-term rental.
You're at 28, sorry.
28,
That's the-
all right.
so-
Well,
Can
we
I
only
just
got
ask
$1 million to play with, and this is all,
Can I ask a curiosity question? Can you tax hotels differently if they have more than one location in the state? Like if they're a chain?
That is a question I would pass along to others.
he crunches numbers.
Yeah.
Not if they're franchise.
I mean, that's a big question.
Yeah.
That's a big question, so it would take some looking into. I mean, there would be some legal issues with if you're basically like changing your tax rate depending on the individual, like isn't it saying like, oh, you're a large chain, so we tax you more because of that, something.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
It's
that
a
would be-
curiosity because I just, we know a lot of the short-term rental folks are like local. And then we're not taxing, you know, the
All right,
large chain.
this is as close as we come. I think
Okay.
we're gonna take some time to draft it.
Can I ask some clarifying things
Yes.
about the?
I wanna do this with us.
It's because, I mean, what's up there, the
Yeah.
SAS is not, I need some clarification about drafting and to help, I could share my screen and show you the definition.
Okay.
I've drafted for you and ask if you would like to just modify that.
Jim, I gotta talk to your photographer.
No good.
No, it's good. You seen the one they put in the,
Madam Chair, would you prefer Kirby got in the seat for this
Sure.
particular?
you don't want that nice comfortable chair? You can have it for
I
Kirby's.
was going to testify from all of them, Chair Eric Swafford,
Yeah.
administrative comment.
Yes,
I believe I made the governor's position clear on taxes, but administratively, the short-term rental change is a form change. And so I would, my team would need that same 8/1 date to
okay,
do that successfully
okay.
programming.
We've got new forms, all right. So we'll note that for the effective date, if we go, I mean, I think this bill is gonna go to conference, I did say if they wanted to go home on Friday, they could just tell them to concur, but I think we may be getting that with the telecom bill. I think there's changes being made, transportation's doing one clarifying thing, I told you about the other one.
Very few for that now.
Well, no, but I think they're gonna concur on that one, which I never thought would happen. I think they are. They're not voting yet?
Upstairs.
Yeah. Oh
So,
my.
so the definition based off of, what I was asked to do last time. So would be a new sales tax exemption, number 57. And so the words you're reading here means it's exempt from sales tax. Pre-written software accessed remotely that is purchased or licensed for commercial purposes, so that's your business to business stuff, and has at least one of the following features. A set of software packages working together as an interconnected network, can be used on multiple computers and is housed or maintained on an enterprise server, a cloud server, an end user computer, or designed to run a computer system, an operating system, or an application software. And so using this language, Ted came up with 8.2. So if we want to get more revenue, one way it's to modify this to not exempt as much. And I do want to speak with the caveat that as far as I know at this point, uncharted territory when it comes to streamline agreement.
Right.
Uh,
But
like,
it
I can't say that
the
this
year to
applies.
catch on, we will have survived. Okay. Well, all those other states are not streamlined?
A lot of them are not. But a lot of, I mean. But
Yeah.
Rhode Island is, and Rhode Island taxes cloud,
Okay.
but I'm not aware of an exemption that Rhode Island has that's like this. That we could copy.
Okay, so what does Rhode Island tax? Everything?
Yes, there's a letter ruling from Rhode Island that actually does in that letter ruling. There's two of them actually that were issued, the only two letter rulings issued last year in Rhode Island. Both of them were about this topic and both of them clearly say that software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service are taxable in Rhode Island.
Okay. I have some concern about. This is May. This tax is going into effect in July. We've got businesses who have not. And we were here in 24,000, 100,000, and those were from small businesses. So I'm wondering if we could, it was said that other states are charged a lower sales tax rate on this. I'm just concerned businesses haven't had a warning that this was coming and no ability to save up with their quarter in the jar like the lady. Yeah,
The National Institute of Standards and Terminology, NIST, I've gotten that wrong, has a very formal definition of SaaS, PaaS, IaaS. I wonder if we can, the national NIST, which this is an acronym we use, National Institute of Standards and Technology. So they're widely recognized statewide. VTrans uses it a lot for different things. They have gone down this path. It was established since 2011, and I can share this document. Is there a path forward where we can reference this well-qualified, documented definitional sources and instruct the tax department to tax categories that fall into, and I can share it on the screen if you want, service models of SaaS, but not PaaS and IaaS.
okay. We are going to call for a roll call momentarily. So we're gonna need to.
Is that ever done? I mean, we do it with VTrans.
It's going to depend. Why don't we start to go upstairs and I'll let the tax department and Kirby see if you can send that to them
So you know.
and see if there's something wording that could be worked out. We could do everything and do it at a lower percentage rate. I think we could do that with Streamline, but I'm not sure.
Streamline has rules about having different tax rates.
That's right, we found that out with streaming. So we're either gonna tax everything. Yeah, Streamline wouldn't like us saying 1% this year, 3% next year. All right, 2% the year after, all right. So see if you can find some wording. I'm being told that Pope's is coming in on Monday. I'm not gonna be free until noon. I'm thinking we could come in maybe at 1. And I don't know if the Pope's can come in, we could come in maybe a little earlier, 12:30. Probably be out by 12.
Oh, so, sorry, were you talking about Monday?
Yeah,
I have texted our committee that we need to meet from about 9 to 11.
I'm not free. I
Okay,
have an appointment in the morning
okay.
and this committee needs to meet.
Our committee needs to meet too, so maybe we can work on
But
this.
I have a deadline to get this out. So I think we'll leave people doing this when we come back. We've got to see if they can work out a definition. I want to start going over the wording that we have.
This is NIST. Very well documented, seen it referenced in other places.
Why are we getting back to infrastructure as a service? I thought we were just doing software.
This is the NIST definition of the 3, so this is software as a service defined, platform as a service.
Okay, but that may not be what the tax department needs.
Hey,
And
to put some context on why it's gonna be difficult for the Department of Taxes is that there's all sorts of different things that like types of software that exist and people come up all the time with different. So with every unique item that's out there, you would have to run it through these definitions and it's not going to be black and white. There's going to be gray areas. So that's where the administration problems come from, with like just how complex it is and how the products are not going to fit into nice buckets.
Okay, I'm gonna send us upstairs now. When we get back, tell us what you can and can't do with this.
Okay.
We may have to concur. And go home. And take the rest of the business community. We could. Start it later in the year, to give them time. To save up and figure out what it will be for them. I don't know if that would give us money to buy down the tax rates that we need. Okay. Let's start upstairs, we can hear what's going on before we